In this demonstration, I'm going to show you how we're going to use Cloud Run to take source code that's sitting in a Git repository, build it in a container with a Docker file, deploy it with Cloud Run, and then be able to access it. So to begin, we're going to go to Cloud Run. Now, I'm going to assume you've already watched the video that I recorded on Cloud Run functions, because I'm going to use some of the same resources that I created there, such as the bucket I've built and other things. But this time we're going to focus on Cloud Run from a container perspective. Now, when I'm in Cloud Run, you'll notice up the top there's an option here for deploy a container. That says if I already have the container built. They've got connect a repository, which is what we're going to do and say we want to build from a Git repo. So we're going to go ahead and choose that. Now you'll notice it's one of our options across the top. Do I already have a container sitting in Artifact Registry or maybe in Docker Hub? Do I want to continuously deploy from our repository? So when code is checked in, we're going to deploy that. Or do I want to do a cloud function? Well, we want to do the cloud build. Now, the first thing it's going to have us do is where is the code that we want to build from? So we're going to go ahead and set it up with cloud build. Now, I've already connected my user at some point previously to my Git repository. So it's already got that, but it doesn't have the Git repository with my sample code that I just pushed up there. So if I look, I'm looking for one called GCP Classroom, and it's not my FinOps class, it's a different one. So we're going to actually go over here and we are going to manage our connected repositories. So it's taking me over to GitHub, and these are all the GitHub that I have access to. So we're going to go into the GCP Classroom where we have this. And what we've got here is this is a Git. This is the public Git, and this has all the different pieces to it. But one of the pieces we need is the GitHub Apps. And the GitHub Apps we see here that Google Cloud Build is connected to this organization in GitHub. And by configuring, I say, well, which repos does it have access to? So it right now only has access to certain repositories. And I created a new one today called Cloud Run Demo. So I'm going to give it access to that particular repo. And it's also going to, that is also going to give it a subscription. So when that GitHub changes, it's going to be notified of changes. So I'm going to go ahead and save that. Now, if you haven't done that before, there might be a few extra steps you need to do to actually get connected. But now if we do GCP Classroom, I should have, there's my Cloud Run demo. Now they're telling me here that I'm giving GitHub permission to that. So if you're in a big, large enterprise, you're probably not going to be able to do this. You probably have your own internal pipeline buildings and things. And so you're looking more the Artifact Registry, Docker Hub type solution. But in my case, I want to build the full CI/CD pipeline because that's going to be what Google expects you to have knowledge of if you're working on your Google Cloud certification exam. Now down here, there's also capture and display source information with container analysis. Oh, that's new. I'm going to click that. It's going to enable that. And it's also telling me build logs will be sent to GitHub. So that's fine. Okay, let's get our GCP Classroom. Looks like when I enabled that feature, it lost what it needed. There we go. We'll give it next. And so now it's got the build information. And it's going to look for builds to the main folder there. So we'll go to Docker, and it's going to be looking for a Docker file. Now we'll look at the code here in just a minute. So while we're waiting for it to initially go. Okay, so we're linked to this source repository. I'm going to copy that here. That's our build trigger is created, and we're going to create our Cloud Run demo is the name of our code going to be. We want an endpoint, and we just want to be able to test this as it deploys, so we'll assume it's going to be public facing. If we required authentication, then we'd have to have a login beforehand. Now, I got a little warning here telling us there might be an organizational policy to prevent us from using unauthenticated invocations. I've tested that. We don't have that problem. We're going to be request-based versus instance-based. Now, request-based, we're only charged when Cloud Run is actually processing a request. So it's on demand. It starts up when the request comes in, it runs, and then it drops. The other option is to be instance-based, where Google always runs at least a full instance running your application. So that the instance versus the request-based. We're going to focus on request-based here. We're going to auto-scale. We're not going to have one warmed up all the time. We're only going to have it start when it receives a request. And then down here, our ingress, our incoming, how do we communicate with it? Is it only accessible internally? So from our projects, VPC and shared VPC, things like that, or do we want it accessible from the internet side of things? And to test, we want it on the internet. Now, down here, we've got, well, what's container? What port is our container going to listen on? And I plan on building a simple Flask web server, so it'll work off that default. Down here, we can choose the environment we're going to run in. So over here, previously, we talked about how we pay for Cloud Run. We pay for each request that comes in. So every time somebody goes to that URL, we're paying for that. And then we're going to pay for each 100 milliseconds of CPU time and each 100 milliseconds of memory we use. So if we were to be using a 128 megabyte worth of computing and how many CPUs, 100 milliseconds of CPU usage and 128 megabytes for a second. Well, if we gave it a gigabyte machine, we'd be giving it, well, we could have 360,000 gigabyte second. So if our function or our Cloud Run takes 1 second to run, we could call it 360,000 times on a 1 gig machine. If we gave it 512, we could actually call it 720,000 times within our free tier of memory usage versus our CPU usage. I'm going to start small. I'm not going to go all the way to 128. I'm going to start with a 256 meg machine. It's got to be big enough to run your code. It's got to have enough room in there for all the libraries you use and things like that. There are some GPU options, looks like, in there. You could add some health checks and other capabilities within here. Now, if you're working on your Cloud Architect exam, you don't really have to know the super deep details of all the options in here. That's more of what a developer, or when you actually are putting that application, your application together. Google's going to expect you to understand conceptually how you use that particular product. And the best way to do that is do some of the basic configuration and basic deployments of it. Okay, now over here, we could mount variables. So we could set environment variables that would be available in that environment. And we could also actually reference a secret. So rather than having the code within our Cloud Run or within our container to read the secret, we could actually have it exposed as an environment variable in the environment by mapping it here. So we could actually point over to our secret and say our secret, we can pull up the latest, and we could expose that as, well, what do we want to call it? We could call it app secret. Now, we'd have to write code to actually read that, and we'd have to include the appropriate operating system modules to read the secret. But it is better than putting it into source code. So we'll keep it there. We might not actually test that out because I haven't done that in a while. I'd have to dig out the code to read that environment variable. But maybe we'll figure out how to get that in our code. We could also do volume mounts. So you can have in-menu file systems and other things like that. You can mount full-on additional volumes. You can do networking. So you can give it some network capabilities. Configure it so that it can talk to your VPC for its requests. So let's say you have within your project, you have a database, you have a VM, you have a Kubernetes cluster, you have something that it needs to call. Well, then you need to have a VPC for outbound traffic. And then over here on security, we definitely don't want to use the default service account. So we're going to go ahead and we're going to create a new service account. We're going to call it our Cloud Run Demo SA, because we're going to create a service account for exactly what we need. And I'm not going to give it any roles at the project level. I'm going to give it a role to say the bucket that we have in a little bit. So let's go ahead and get this created. So we're going to be tied to our Git repository. It's going to do an initial deployment, so we'll create it. And it's going to take it a minute or two to actually go through and work on this. Why? Well, it's got to create the service, it's got to set the IAM policy, it's got to create the cloud build trigger, and then it's got to build and deploy what we have. Permission denied on the secret. So we've already got an error there. So we would have to give our service account but not our application service account. We need to give the project's service account for Cloud Run. Oh, actually, no, never mind. It is our service account. It's our Cloud Run demo SA. So let's go ahead and give it secret manager, secret accessor. So it's already mad at us for that. So it is going to use our secret. So let's go to our secret manager. Let's go over to console here, bring up secret manager. Sorry, I thought it might have been the robot that needed, but it makes sense. Our secret does need to be accessed by our service account. So let's add it. And remember, you build a different service account for each Cloud Run or Cloud Run function you build. That way you can implement least privilege. So we're going to give it secret manager, secret accessor. Now, while we're here, we also should do that bucket too, just in case we want to make our container do some of our bucket work. So we'll pop into our buckets, and we're going to give it our bucket, which was our GC demo environment bucket. And we will go ahead and set our permission, and we'll add our service account, giving it permission just to this one bucket. I would not want to give this permission to all the buckets. So I don't want to do it on the project level. I want to just do it on the specific bucket. Now, let's say my code wants to write files. So in addition to reading files, maybe it wants to write files. Well, that could be a storage object creator, which is allowed to create objects, but it doesn't give permission to view, delete, or replace objects. We could give it storage object admin, which lets us have full control, listing, creating, viewing, and deleting objects. But the one you really want to use if you need read-write access to a bucket is storage object user. It's allowed to create files in a bucket. It's allowed to read files in a bucket. It's allowed to update files in a bucket and delete the files in the bucket, because sometimes an update operation is actually a delete and then upload a new version. So we'll go ahead and we'll give it cloud storage or storage object user to that bucket. That way, if we want to add some code for that. Okay, so let's see how our revision is. So we've got, it's kind of chugging along here, and it looks like just now. So it's hopefully picked up that we had we've kind of resolved the secret problem. There we go. Look at that. It's going to start routing our traffic to our container. Let's get a refresh on my screen here. And there we go. It's deployed. So let's see what happens. We'll click here, and we got a random number is that. Okay, what's that all about, Grant? Well, if you remember, we deployed a container. So notice we don't have a source here. We're deploying from our Git repository. So what do we need to do to look at that? Well, I'm going to head up to GitHub here to begin. So let's see where we're deploying from. How can we tell? Well, let's take a look at, we've got our service. We've got edit and deploy our new version. We could edit the continuous deployment. We could look at the YAML. So the YAML says what container is it actually running. So you notice it's got a reference to our service account. It's got a reference to the environment size and a whole bunch of IDs. But that's not going to point to our Git, because we actually have a series of events happen. The GitHub is going to Cloud Build. So Cloud Build is pulling the code in from GitHub when it gets notified that something's changed at Git. It's building the container. It's putting the container into Artifact Registry, and then Cloud Run is pulling it from Artifact Registry. So the YAML won't have anything about that upstream. But let's pop into Cloud Build. So I'm going to go in here, and I'm going to say Cloud Build. And let's look at our Cloud Build. So Cloud Build, here we go. We have our build here, and it just built. And if we take a look, here's our repositories. Okay, it's showing our second generation. Let's see, do we have anything on first generation? Nope. So it's not seeing anything here, because it doesn't actually point to our Git. It's actually going to be over here. Let's look at our trigger, because remember, we're not storing the code. Now, years ago, Google had a product called Cloud Source Repositories, which were like mini Gits within your project. But so many organizations utilize Git or Git Enterprise or other tools that Google's like, we don't need another Git. So what we're looking at here is we're looking at a trigger. So Cloud Build says, I'm listening for triggers to this particular repository. Ah, there it is. So let's go bring that up. So here we go. So this is a public Git repo that I've built called GCP Classroom Cloud Run Demo. And my Cloud Run Demo has a little Docker ignore file that says ignore these files, don't push these, don't build those into the container. Cool. I've got my app, and my app is a simple Flask, which is a web server with Waitress, and I've got operating system level functions, I've got logging functions, and I've brought in random. And my code looks like it's got a base web page of /, and it says your random number is, and it generates a random number for you. And if we go to /version, our application returns an ROI GCP demo 1.0. Okay, so that's my app. Simple little 21-line little mini web server, but great little framework to start building. Now, did I really come up with this? No. Google's actually got this in their Cloud Run documentation of a sample container to build with Python. Something very similar. Waitress does add some more enterprise features to Flask. So that's about the only extent. And this just down here says if this container just gets called, it starts listening on the port environment variable or 8080. So whatever, if there's no environment variable for port, it'll just go with 8080. Okay, so that's the code. And here is the instructions. Oh, there's my requirements. Sorry, Flask and Waitress. And here is my Docker file. Now, the way a Docker file works, just as a quick refresh, when you're running a Docker container, the Docker container is everything but the Linux kernel. And a good way to think about how Docker works is Docker borrows the kernel of the underlying system. So when Google runs your container, it's running on top of a Linux machine. So your container can borrow the Linux kernel, and then it adds all the tools from your base container. So in my case, Python 3.1.1 container. It copies over my requirements file into app requirements. So copies the requirements file, goes into that directory, pip installs what it needs, copies in my app, and then runs Python 3 app.py when the container starts. Okay, so that's kind of the basics of my code. Don't worry so much about the code. We're interested in the pipeline for what we're doing here. But that's what happened, and those were all part of my first push that I did just before I started recording this demo. And so the trigger is, and Git notifies Google when there's a change to that repository. So when there's a push to that, and that will go ahead and trigger the building of our container. Well, turns out I've got this ready to go. So I've got this in I've got Docker Desktop running here. And in my Docker Desktop here, I've got my Cloud Run demo. And I'm going to go ahead and open this up and show it in Explorer here. And it should come up. Oh, here we go. It's in this directory. So I'm just going to use a simple tool like Notepad. And so I'm going to go into my app.py. I'm going to open this up with Notepad. And I'm just going to make a couple little changes to this. So we are going to, let's just cut down our random number and your random number, and we're going to call this ROI class, or actually this was GCP Classroom Demo 1.1. And maybe we'll add another pathway on our application here. So we're going to say list, and we say list files. We'll call this list files, and we'll say return. Listing of files is not available right now. Okay, but we added a little bit of code there. That's where we're going to fill in the similar code that we had from before. But let's go ahead, and that's good. So that file will save. And let's tweak our Docker file a little bit here. I know I'm making a lot of changes at the same time, but should be okay. I'm going to increase this up so that it uses Python 3.1.2. So we're going to close that out. Okay, and let's do our requirements here. Let's open that up because maybe we want to add our So we got Flask, we got Waitress coming in here. And let's see, we still got Visual Studio from earlier. Yeah, remember we wanted to put in Secret Manager and we wanted to do storage. So let's get these two in here. Because our code is we want Google Storage because maybe we want to add that. And maybe we want to add some Secret Manager. So we're going to go ahead and close those. Okay, so what's going to happen now? Well, back here, my Docker desktop says, hey, you got 3 new files, Grant. I say, yeah. So we're going to say, we're going to do the demo update. And we're going to say we added 2 requirements.txt, added a /list files to the app. And we also updated from 3.11 to 3.12. It's probably the more important part of what we did here. Okay, so we're going to commit those, and I'm going to push them. So we're just push those changes. So what magic is going to happen right now? Okay, so the magic is Google is going to see that there's a change to the Git repository. Okay, so we go take a look over here. Let's do a refresh. And I know I pushed to the main branch. I didn't create anything, but we've got in here, look, we just made a change to the Docker file, the app, and the requirements. And so the trigger will have now been triggered. How do we know that? Well, let's go look at our history. And let's get a refresh. And hopefully we'll see something. Come on. Should be there. Just not patient enough. But what should happen, because we push those changes, it should begin to build that container. Now, let's give it a second. Let's go back over here and see if we can catch it doing anything. Nothing here because it's not the responsibility of Cloud Run, is it? Wait a minute. Cloud Run demo. It's seeing something. Look at that. It's saying something's happening with our Cloud Run demo. We haven't seen anything there, but let's go back and check out our trigger and let's look at our build history. See if there's anything happening. Not just yet. Not seeing anything there. Let's go back to our dashboard. Not seeing anything. But let's see what's happening back within our vision here. It's saying something's happening. So something is pending. Look at that. Something's happening behind the scenes. So something just triggered the creation of what we had. And in fact, if we look over here, there's a new version being deployed. And so we'll just give it a second. Let's look at our logs here. See, yep. So a build is running. It's pulling down our containers. Look down here. See there, we see it's installing Flask and Waitress. And now look, it's installed Cloud Storage and Secret Manager. We're seeing it then going to push over into the Cloud Run repository. And then it's going to go ahead and update our Cloud Run demo. So that all just happened. And if we look at our build history, let's go ahead and, oh, you know what? I bet I wasn't set to global. I was set to central from before. Yeah, that's why we didn't see this right away. Yeah, because I was back over here on history and it had toggled to central from before. I missed that. Oh well. We can now see though that there was definitely something. So it's triggered them to go ahead and do the build. Where's US Central? Yeah, this is what we were seeing just a few minutes ago, and it was like, hey, I didn't see it. But down here under a global non-regional build, it kicked off to build our container. And we see the status, and it was all built successfully from our version. And when we go look at our revision, it's now deployed that. And we take a look at our Cloud Run demo, our random number is shorter. If we did version, we're looking at the GCP Classroom Demo 1. And if we look at list files, listing of files isn't available yet. We just need to incorporate the code for that URL. So our app did get updated with that pipeline push. And so it starts with the Git repository. Cloud Build goes through and builds that into the container. Now, we haven't looked to see where the container actually is. Well, over here we can see there's our source. There's the image, and the image is in uscentraldocker.pkg.dev, GC demo environment cloud run source. What exactly is that? Well, I could click on that and it's going to take me to the right place, but I want you to think of it this way. Artifact. We're going to look at artifact registry. And artifact registry, there's our deployment that we have. So if we look over here, these are all the different things. So we have our Cloud Run demo that we built, and here's the version it built 3 minutes ago. There's the version it built 14 minutes ago. So it went into Git, Cloud Build, built it in a container, and then put it into here. And now it's getting ready to be deployed to, and it's pushed over to Cloud Run. Now you'll notice at the top, there's an option here, turn on vulnerability scanning. Google offers, so my registry right now doesn't have vulnerability scanning going on. But if I turn that on, every time there's a push to something that winds up in the artifact registry, it's going to be scanned. So we'll get automatically scanning of images as we push them into the registry. So existing images should be pushed again to initiate scanning. And there's some things in there that if you don't push regularly, so if you don't put things through your pipeline, you may not, you get the scan sort of when it's pushed rather than, every few minutes or every few days. So if you haven't pushed your container in about 30 days, it's not a bad idea to push your container again. But see here, so now we see it's never been scanned yet because it's going to scan it behind the scenes. Now let's push another little change through just to see that whole process now that we've seen everything. So let's pop into our app here and let's go ahead and we'll edit our app a little bit. And what are we going to have it do? Let's just increment this to 1.2 and we'll say we're going to give a random number between 1 and 500, your random number between 1 and 1.00 and 5,000.00 is, right, because I'm dividing by 100. So we made a little bit of a change there. And if we wanted to list our files, well, we could go and make some of the adjustments to the code like we did earlier. We could probably do that. Where did my VS Code? Oh, it's closed my VS Code. That's okay. We'll just go back into VS Code here. Should pick up where we left off. Let's have it list our blobs. So we'll go ahead and from Google Cloud, we'll import storage. And so we'll put that into our code here. We'll go ahead and we'll do our list files. And let's just do this. Borrow this code here. I know somebody's like, you should put that all into a function, Grant. You are exactly right. But we're going to do bucket name equals, and our bucket was, let's grab where our bucket was. My bucket, here we go. That was my GCP env bucket. And did we give our service account permissions? We did. We did our Cloud Run SAs, got storage object user. So we pop that into our code here. So our bucket name, we're going to create the client. We're going to get the storage. We're going to call blobs to get the list. And what we're going to do, we get rid of that. And we got file list. Let's just make it files in bucket. And then we'll do plus our bucket name plus BR. And we're going to list that. And we're just going to do file list equals file list plus, we'll do the blob name plus BR. And we can return a file list. So there we go. So we got it using some code. And we'll go and just save that. So we save that as long as I didn't make any typos. We'll go back over here and we're going to say updated the file listing code. And we'll commit that. And we'll push it. And now, since we know where to look, we should be able to go back and see. So let's pop into our build history. Look at that. That was like instantly. Yeah, now that we're looking in the right place, we're seeing, so Google's triggered that build to happen. And it was the commit that happened into the Git repository. So this is now building. And so our build, the first step, it's on 0. It's got the Cloud Builders, the Docker, which is basically it's using Docker to go through, read the Docker file. So from Python 3.12, it's pulling in the layers. We do a periodic refresh on this. And so now the build has gone through. It's still working on its pieces. Still taking a little bit, the cloud build. It looks like it, I think it took 2 or so minutes last time. And then it'll do a push and push it over into there. And then it'll tell Cloud Run, update what you need. So the build is like saying, how do we build this environment? Yep. So now 2 happened. We copied in the requirements. 3, we changed the working directory. 4, it's running pip install with all the stuff from the requirements file. And then when it's all done, we have a container. And then it's going to push that container. So we take a look at our artifact registry. I still have that open. Okay, there's our, well, that's not quite it. Here we go. So there's our Cloud Run. And see, we have a brand new one. And it's scanning it for vulnerabilities right now. And, it found a bunch of vulnerabilities in there because of perhaps some of the libraries I'm using or things like that. And I think there's a lot in there. So I got a critical error in there, probably because the container I'm using. Zip, open new file. Oh, yeah, that's got some, looks like I should take a look at the libraries I'm using on that. Probably time to update it. And then it's just found some vulnerabilities, definitely something I'm going to want to resolve. But hey, it's good. At least we're now aware of what we got to look at. And then once that goes, hopefully we can now get into our revision. We'll get a refresh on this screen. And we should now see it's split over to the 4. And now we've got our new version. And let's see what happens. So our new version gives us 1 to 5,000. And let's see if list files works. And list files is showing us the files in the bucket. We upload a new file to the bucket. And what happens? Put a new file up into our bucket. I'm going to put a file, here we'll put a file called backyard. And we'll call our function again. Backyard's now present, so our code is working. And we have service account nicely within the configuration, not hard-coded in the container or anything like that. We've got it calling with least privilege to our bucket and doing everything we need it to. And so Cloud Run is deployment of a container. If you start with your source code, so if you're building something just kind of on the public side of things, you're using a Git or Git Enterprise and you have it push it all the way through. If you were doing this from, say, an internal system where maybe you have your own internal artifact registry, what you often do is you'll push. So maybe you got Artifactory, maybe you got Nexus, maybe you got one of those sort of tools. What you do is you push your built containers once you've approved them internally over into artifact registry of a project. And then from artifact registry, we can pull over into the application. So we don't always have to have the Git and everything upstream, but the full CI/CD pipeline that Google wants you to recognize for the exam is that you could pull from Git or Bitbucket or GitHub Enterprise, bring it in, build it with Cloud Build, push it into artifact registry, that's CI, and then CD is to take it from artifact registry and deploy it out to Google. And Cloud Build can do both those steps. We actually see that in the build process of what it did. It built it, but that could be an on-premise system. That doesn't have to be built. Your on-premise could take care of steps 0 and 1. Your CI could be completely your internal process. And then your CD could just be a Cloud Build saying when a new container is pushed into the artifact registry, we deploy that out to Cloud Run. All right, so that hopefully was a nice little deep dive into Cloud Run. There's obviously more things going on with Cloud Run that you might do. A couple other little things just to think about is right now we've got everything's going to version 4. Notice over here we've got traffic of 100% going to the latest. One of the common strategies, though, is maybe we don't want everything to go to this one in case this one has some bugs in it. Maybe I want to use managed traffic, and maybe I'd like to say, well, I want to send 90% of my traffic to the old version. Okay, so 90% is going to go to version 3, and only 10% is going to go to version 4. What do we call that? Well, in Google, we call that a canary test because, well, it's the term canary in a coal mine. When the coal miners, before they come up with ways to detect toxic gas in the mines, they would take a canary down in the mines with them. And if they hit a pocket of methane or other toxic gas and the bird died, they knew to get out of the mine. Yeah, kind of bad on the bird. And I'm a bird guy. You guys, I got pictures of my bird. That's kind of sad, but that's what they used to do. So, one person's job was to watch the canary, and if the canary dies, get everybody out of the mine because there's toxic gas, and the bird's lungs were much more sensitive than ours. So the idea of a canary test when it comes to deploying a new version, maybe we send 90% of the traffic to the existing app, we send 10% to the new version, and if it operates fine and you don't see an increase in errors and things like that, you can have your application, and you can slowly increase the capacity. As you maybe 10, maybe then you start to go 20, maybe you go to 50, and then when you're fully happy, you go ahead and deploy 100% to the new version. Now, there's some other strategies, maybe a 50-50 test. Maybe you do 50% to one version, 50% to the other version app, because maybe you moved around something on the UI a little bit. We've all been on that website and you go, man, this doesn't look like it will look like yesterday. Something slightly different. Heck, we see it all the time with Google and Amazon and all the other websites out there. They change little things, but they don't necessarily change them for everybody. They might say, if we relocate this button here, do we have less errors? Do people do things more efficiently? Do they buy our product more frequently, etc.? So that would be a 50-50 split, or what's known as an A/B test. There's version A and there's version B. And we can do all that with our traffic splitting. So here we've got 10% are getting our new app, 90% are getting our old app. And so this is one of those things that could pop up on your exam talking about how to deploy. See, so this is getting my random number. It's just that. Oh, look, and every now and again, I will get sent the new one. See, refresh. There we go. See, now I got the new version. So let's throw our version here on the end. Version 1.1. Oh, I don't think we changed the version number. I think let's do list files. So list files, listing files is not available, but all of a sudden, every now and again, somebody gets a list of the files. We're trying out that new feature and we're saying, ooh, but imagine if that feature, crashed it or something. So crashed our app. Well, we could do it. So those are sort of strategies. We do that with traffic splitting, and it's natively built into Cloud Run. And so that's one of the things you might do with Cloud Run. Now, the other thing you might do is say, well, are there other ways we could trigger our code to work? And that is, yeah. So we could go over here to triggers, and there's like, what are the triggers we can use? Our trigger was a URL. We could also have a trigger of a pub sub message. We could also trigger our cloud function or our Cloud Run on a file going in a bucket. Maybe you want to process a file when it's uploaded. But what Google does with EventArc is they basically say the majority of Google APIs could actually trigger your Cloud Run to work. And so you notice over here it says EventArc API. So if I enable that API, I could basically say now, when somebody creates a new bucket, I want to have my Cloud Run. So not just a file in a bucket, just a new bucket. Or I could say somebody, we could do Google searches. We could say somebody creates a new service account. So we could go under, let's see, IAM. I'm sure it's here. Of course, I probably said one that we can't do. I'm pretty sure we can. Let's do IAM. Okay, come on, I want to filter IAM. There we go. Cloud IAM service account. So Cloud IAM, and what did they do? I could say somebody creates a new service account. Somebody creates a new service account. I want my event to trigger. Or somebody runs, let's look up BigQuery. So somebody goes into BigQuery and somebody executes a creation of a data set, insert of a data set, update of a data set, or somebody lists tables, or somebody runs a job, anything like that, we could actually go through and trap. So you really can trap the majority of events that occur inside of Google with the event arc. Now, looks like it needs a couple little extra things. It says if, depending on what you want to use, it might need you to enable a certain role to let the pub sub work, because a lot of these are handled by pub sub behind the scenes. And speaking of pub sub, I'm going to go record a video now on pub sub. So, but yeah, there's a lot of things that will happen in Cloud Run. Moving forward, as you start to use more and more Google Cloud, you're probably going to see a lot more Cloud Run usage just in the way you do it. But it's an incremental learning, just like on VMs. We start with building a basic VM, and then we add more features, and then we learn more and more about it. The same thing's going to happen with tools like Cloud Run and Cloud Run functions and things like that. So hopefully you enjoyed the last 40-minute video. And I'm going to go record one more, so go watch the pub sub video now if you want to learn about pub sub.